We're going to walk through the process here of setting up a data logger on a DACb, kind of give you some information before we do some programming. That data is stored behind this door here. So if I loosen this up, there's going to be an SD card in here. So every controller should come with a 512 megabyte industrial SD card. That goes in this slot. So once we have our data on here, that's where we're going to actually pull that data from, is that SD card. We would put that SD card into our laptop where we would get a CSV file with all the data. So really setting up the data logger is going to be your last thing you're going to do in the process. You can see my controller here is already set up. I have pH on channel 1. I'm measuring free chlorine on channel 2, total chlorine on channel 3, and then there's my 3 channels. You'll notice that I am currently controlling with channel 1, so I have this set up to, this is just kind of an example of it's dosing acid for my pH control, and I have a chlorine pump also set up on channel 2. So what I'm going to do is, to set up my data logger, I'm going to hit the menu key. The data is all under the diagnostic screen, so I'm going to go in there. You're going to go to logbooks. From the logbooks, we're going to go first with the data log. So I'm going to click there. We want to set it up, so we're going to go down to configuration. If you go into this screen and you don't see the configuration option, if you have this checked, right now it's saving the data, but I want to pick which data I want to be saved, so I'm going to uncheck that. You can see it brings up that configuration screen for me. So I'm going to go down to configuration. Now on this screen, it's asking me what kind of data do I want to record. So once you go in here initially, it's going to have everything checked. For my case here, I don't need some of this information. So right now, channel 1 measure value, which is my pH, I do want to know what that is. So it's going to record my pH value. Temperature, I can tell you in this example, I don't have temperature on channel 1, so there's no reason for it to record that. So I'm going to click it there so it unmarks it. I am controlling, that's my acid pump there. I know on channel 1 for pH I have an acid pump. So I want to collect that data of what my acid pump's doing, so I'll leave that checked. Channel 2 is my free chlorine. So I am measuring there, so let's record that. I don't have a temperature sensor, so there's no reason for us to record that. I am controlling with a chlorine pump, so we will also collect that. Moving down to channel 3, which is my total chlorine sensor. I am measuring, so we'll keep that. I don't have temperature, don't need that, and I don't have a pump related to channel 3, so there's no reason for us to collect that. Digital inputs, in this example I have a flow sensor, just a flow switch in our DGMA that's telling me whether or not I have flow or no flow. So I'm going to record that. I would like to know if my flow drops out. Right now it's telling us that it's going to create 1 foul per day, and it's going to log that every 60 seconds. So every 60 seconds it's going to create a snapshot of everything I have checked above there, and then it's going to throw that into a CSV file and do that every minute for the whole day, and then the next day it's going to create a new file with all the data for that day. I can tell you that the size of the card is a 512 megabyte card in there. If you log it 10 seconds, there is enough room on that card to log for 20 straight years. So that card should be sufficient size to go into most of your data. If the data does start to fill up that card, it will store it on the internal memory for a couple days, and then it will start rewriting over the old data. So I'm going to leave this at 60 seconds. So this is all set up here. I'm going to hit escape. Once I have it set up, I do have to make sure I click the save so that it is actually saving that data, and I can back out of screen. So along with that data, I can also log errors that are on there. So I just have to make sure I'm not telling you it's going to record all the errors that it sees. I'm not going to be able to pick which ones I wanted to record. So I just have to make sure I click save so that it is logging those. You hit escape. Calibrations. Anytime somebody does a calibration, it will log the results of that calibration as long as I go here and click the save. I'm going to back out. So right now we are logging calibration, error, and the data on there. I'm going to back all the way out to our main screen. So at this point it's set up, your controller is running, it's measuring what it's doing. Every 60 seconds it's going to take a snapshot of all those variables we had checked, log that data onto the SD card. So the next step would be getting that data. So what we would do at that point, after it's logged a sufficient amount of data, we want to look at some of those results. We just come up here, we can leave the controller running, open this, grab our card, and we're going to take this to a laptop. It is still logging data while the card is out. It will, while that card's out, it's going to store that data to an internal memory. If we have it set up to log every 10 seconds, it will be able to log for a day before that internal memory is filled up. If we have it set up for 60 seconds, for example, it will give us 6 times that. So it will be somewhere around 6 days of data before it's going to have to start writing over that in the internal memory. Once we come back and we put the card back into the controller, it will import that internal memory data into the SD card for that data that was missed while we were looking at our data on our laptop. So I'm going to next step show you how to put this into your computer and make a meaningful file out of it.
So we have we took our SD card out of our DACb. I put it into my laptop. Luckily has an SD card slot in it, so I was able to plop it right in there. If not, you can get an adapter that would give you an SD card, and you can put it into that adapter that would then plug into your USB port. So you can see once I plugged it in my computer, it pulled up the files that are in that SD card. So you can see we have a separate folder for our errors, our data, our configuration, and our calibration. So what I'm going to do is just look at our data here. So you can see mine had separate files in there. So I'm going to grab just this one for instance. Open up this data. This one didn't look like it had much logs, so let's open up a different one here. So you can see there's a whole bunch of data. Now the problem is all this data is in one cell, and it's in cell A, 1 through 100, whatever it is. So that could be a problem because we want to actually make sense of this data. So what I'm going to do is I need to highlight the A there, so it's highlighting that whole column. I'm going to click on the Data tab, go to Text to Columns. Here I'm going to change it to delimited. Okay, because you'll notice that everything is separated by semicolons here. So there's semicolons in between all of the data. So it's going to pick out all those semicolons and create a new cell for each one of those. We're going to hit Next. Here's where I'm going to click semicolons, unclick Tab, go to Next, and then just hit Finish. So now you can see I have all that data into separate cells that I can now take and do whatever I want with. Just here kind of expanding some of them so we can read some of the values. So you can see here's the date and time. Our channel 1 had a pH of 7. It wasn't controlling because our set point is 7, so the pump was not pumping. Our channel 2, which is our free chlorine, had a reading of 0.88 ppm. And at that point, we were controlling 60% to chlorinate. Our measured value for channel 3 was 0.53 ppm. Temperature is no control was set up there, so it's not even logging that, because remember we had that stuff unchecked, so it's not even going to log that value. And you can see our input 1 was inactive. These ones we don't have turned on. So there's our data for the day. I'm going to close out of this. You could save it, name it whatever you want. I'm not going to save it in this case. I'm going to go back. Same thing with the calibration log. You can open up this one. I don't have much data in here. I haven't calibrated much on this controller. It's just sitting in our lab for demo purposes. Once I'm in here, you can see all this data is in this first cell. All this data is in this first cell. So again, highlight it, data, text to columns, delimited, unclick tab, clip semicolon, next, hit finish, and now everything is in separate cells, which gives me more manageable Excel file here. So you can see that at this date, on this time, channel 1 was calibrated for pH. Here was your slope and 0 point. So you'll get that every time somebody does a calibration. As long as you have it in the controller where we set up to save that, it will create a information data for each one of those calibrations. I'm not going to save. Go back. Same thing with error log. Every time there is an error, it's going to log it. You'll get a file like the other ones. Highlight, data, text to columns, delimited, semicolon, unclick tab, next, finish. So you can see on a certain date, at a specified time, a certain thing happened to a certain channel, and it tells you the message. So right here, channel 2 had a warning saying we hadn't calibrated yet. Here's my loss of flow. So I know that I have my controller set up so if we lose flow through our DGMA, it's going to pause the controller because I don't want to feed chemical. So you can see right here that it appeared at this time, appeared, was cleared, appeared, cleared. You know, again, this is just a demo controller. So that is the process of setting up the data logger, and after it's set up and actually captured that data, this is the final step of getting that data into a meaningful file.